Okay, thank you. It looks like we do have a quorum. So this is Brianna. I'll start with the agenda here. Good afternoon, everyone. It's December 7th, 2023. This is the GBOS special meeting regarding budgets, bridge funding, and STR ordinance. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors, its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 public meetings. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meetings Standards of Conduct. I'll call this meeting to order at 12:02. I am Brianna Sullivan, co-chair and fire department supervisor. Let's go with in the room, please.
Mike Edgerton, Housing and Economic Development Supervisor.
Thank you, Mike. And then Jennifer, followed by Amanda.
Jennifer Wingard, co-chair and land use supervisor.
Amanda Sassy, public safety and road supervisor.
And thank you. And I see Guy.
Guy Wade, parks cemetery supervisor.
Thank you. We have everyone present. And I would ask right now, okay, we just did roll call, if there's any disclosures, or we could do any disclosures at the item number. Otherwise, we could move on.
Brianna,
yes.
I could do it now just to get it over with.
Okay.
Okay. So because we have STRs on the list, in the past, I know I've disclosed, I had ones in Girdwood. Those are sleeper listings. So they haven't been activated in over 5 years. And at the time I used them only for, at the request of a long-term tenant who was needing to get in or out of a lease early or late or whatever. However, they are still technically sleeper listings. And did I already say I haven't used them since 2018? If I'm correct about the nature of this conversation, which I think is going to be about whether or not Girdwood, whether or not we want to have an answer about Girdwood's position on this, then I don't know how relevant it is, but I do also have an STR that I operate in Anchorage in the summers for 2.5 to 3 months.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I believe that you did start off on the explanation of the nature of the interest. So it is then up to the body to decide if, or you can also declare if it's financial or personal, and if it's financial, how significant of financial interest.
Okay, let me address that one. If the regulation goes through as currently written, the Anchorage STR would be subject to the $400 registration fee. So to that extent, there is some financial, again, I think our discussion is more around what Girdwood's reaction and not what we want to say about what Anchorage is happening. But that's why I think it's pretty important to have this as a board discussion.
Right, thank you. And what I have in front of me, Jennifer, are kind of the lists of the adopted assembly's conflict of interest questions, but then I'll just ask who holds the interest. So is it you, family,
Right. Well, it's a family owned.
Okay. And then you did touch on this, saying it was previously in 2018, but just to reiterate, when did the interest arise? So allowing this body to determine was it past, present, or future?
So the Girdwood STR listing is past, although again, it's a sleeper listing, and if it's really hard to imagine, but if I was in a situation where one of my tenants asked me to reactivate that, then I could. So there's the potential I would get back involved with it. That option primarily existed when the market was not quite so tight. So now if I have a sudden vacancy, it's been easy to fill. So it's not a thing anymore. So the Girdwood interest is past. The Anchorage interest is current.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And the following question has an A, B, or C. So does the matter coming before the body impact the interest? So is it substantial, part of the matter under consideration. And that
Okay,
is up to
right.
your
Right.
opinion.
So again, it depends on what we think we're discussing. So if we are going to discuss whether or not the $400 fee is appropriate for Anchorage, then then we get into the discussion of whether or not 400 is substantial. But if it's about whether or not Girdwood is involved in this, then no, the answer is no.
Right. Thank you for saying that, because interest is both, could be financial or personal. And then there are a couple more, but the job of our body is then to affirm whether, or sorry, you affirm whether you can place the interest of public above private interest.
So
Or
I say
be
yes.
excused.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So yes, I do believe that I can place public above private in this circumstance.
Okay. Thank you. And now I'll open up to questions from the board if anyone has any for the person making the disclosure. And Guy, your hand's up. So go ahead,
Yeah.
Guy, if you have.
Hey, Jennifer, the sleeper, does that mean they're long-term rentals now, or they're just not being rented at all?
Oh, that's a good question. No, they're long-term rentals, and they've actually always been long-term rentals. I've only plopped them into the short-term rental market when somebody needed to get out of a lease early or late.
Okay,
Or into.
thank you.
So, yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
clarifying that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was also curious what that meant. I don't know the lingo. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just one question. I think a lot of the questions were answered in the case of just the $400 registration fee, but there's a whole bunch of other requirements as well. I think there's a requirement for inspection. There's a whole bunch of other things as well that go with that. So I think the interest and impact would be, at least in as written, would be greater than just the dollar amount.
Right. That's true. Thank you for that. That is correct. For various reasons, the other aspects of that ordinance don't affect me very much. Like we were in the house that is being operated as a VRBO was an assisted living facility, so we're not concerned about it passing inspections, and I'm on site. So anyway, the other things are not. But again, I guess what that points to, Mike, is the question of if we're going to get into our recommendations for if it's bull wide or if we're trying to focus more on Girdwood. But either way, I think I can put the public interest above my own. And also, I'm comfortable with not weighing in on, if we end up voting about anything about Anchorage wide, then I'm comfortable with not voting on that too. I mean, whatever the board decides.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions? The only thing I would add with your last comment, Jennifer, that is a possibility is we could basically break up the conflict and say that if that was something you felt more comfortable with, that if we make a ruling or a decision based around Anchorage, you can be recused from the Anchorage one. But right now, the way it's written on our agenda, I agree, is for the Girdwood GBOS actions. Let's see. So I would feel comfortable with a board decision on this, which I think I can do instead of ruling. Do you know if that's possible, Margaret? Or Kyle?
I'll make it simpler. I can, whatever you do, I'll request a vote anyway, so we affirm it.
Okay. Okay. Well, it is my ruling that I would like the board to do a roll call vote on whether our board member can participate and in the discussion and action, because they are together, discussion and action.
Did you make a decision and we're voting on it, or are you just recommending we vote?
Okay.
Guy? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe can we have this vote after we discuss it so we know what we're actually the action's going to be and kind of a little more about it? Would that muddy the waters or, you know, I mean, it seemed like that would clear things up if, you know, what if we decide to, not do anything or, you know, or what if we decide to do something that really involves that one in Anchorage and the sleeper ones here? So it might be worth having this vote
Understood.
once we know
Uh,
what we're gonna,
mhm.
what our action will be. That's just my comment. I'll go either way.
Thank you, Guy. Well, per that suggestion, I would definitely feel more comfortable than making a ruling that Jennifer may not participate or be recused from any discussion of our decisions and action on Anchorage short-term rentals, but she may participate and act on the Girdwood short-term rentals. Any challenges to my ruling? I don't hear any, so
Sorry, I'm going to request,
go ahead.
let's just do that. Why don't we do this as a vote? First of all, I think the question of whether you can discuss or not, the code says that you can't participate in the discussion. You can't participate in the deliberation if you're found to have a conflict, a substantial conflict. So I think that part is fairly clear. I think there is an interesting question here about, you know, whether we're clearly discussing the things within the context of an Anchorage-wide proposal. But I think that another interesting way of thinking about a similar problem is if one of us owned an Airbnb in, I don't know, Talkeetna or Kenai Peninsula or something, would we take part in this discussion? And I think there the answer is probably yes, we could take part. So if item 3 was purely restricted to Girdwood only, then I think on the short-term rental side, I would probably say it'd be okay to participate. But I'm not sure how we split those apart. But anyway, I'm going to call for a vote on what you just suggested. So what you suggested is if we split if I understand this correctly, Rihanna, you basically said we consider 3 as 2 parts, one part being the existing ordinance that applies to Anchorage, and the second part being what we do with Girdwood. And then
Yes, Mike.
And you would rule that Jennifer cannot take part in the Anchorage-wide discussion, but can take part in the Girdwood discussion.
Yes, you explained that much more clearly, and that is how I was trying to interpret that. And
in that case, can I amend my motion, please? What I would like to do first of all is withdraw what I originally said. So my first motion would be to split item 3 into 2, into item 3 and item 4. So item 3 is discussion of the Anchorage-wide short-term rental proposal, and item 4 is discussion of how short-term rental regulation in Girdwood could work.
Okay. I would entertain a second for that motion, even though it's regarding the agenda, but it's helping us determine where we are with disclosures.
Right, I'll second it if it's an agenda, you know, however you want to make record of it, you know, if it's an agenda modification or something.
Thank you, Guy. Any objections to changing the agenda to a 3 and 4 with the method Mike just stated? Okay, so we have changed that. So moving forward, then do we
So
go ahead?
I'd like to make a motion. I believe now we're just discussing the disclosure for item 3. Well, we're discussing item 3 and item 4, but I believe your ruling would be that Jennifer would not take part in item 3, but would take part in item 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, in that case, I'd just call for a vote to the body either confirms or opposes your recommendation.
Thank you. So Margaret or Kyle, if you could do that, please.
We need a second for that motion.
We do. Do we have a second?
I can second, but can we, that brings up a time for discussion, right?
Yes. Yes.
I guess, yeah, since we're discussing that specifically, I'm gonna oppose that. I feel like that having somebody with a short-term rental and a stake in the game is valuable to the conversation. So, so I don't know if you want to change, you know, I'm not asking you to change it, but just as a discussion point, it seems like it doesn't raise to substantial as far as monetary wise, and there's this far away gaze at it from I'm looking at it right now, and this discussion would benefit with somebody that yeah has a stake in the game. I mean, not is living it, or it will affect directly. So that's just
Thank you, Guy. So, Guy, you're referring to the Anchorage stake in the game, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay.
I have a suggestion. If Guy, if you want to raise that to it as an amendment, move that as an amendment to my motion.
Yeah, if we could amend that motion, just to split those in two, I think that's what you're getting to, Mike.
Yeah.
2 votes.
So
Yeah.
for the purposes of discussion, I will second your amendment.
So, so for procedure wise, just to be clear, you're amending that there is no conflict with Jennifer partaking in the discussion about the Anchorage STRs regulation.
That, from what I understand, we're gonna vote separately on each one. There's still the first one is there will be a conflict, and if we agree with that, we vote yes, right? And then the second one is there will not be a conflict, and if we agree with that, we vote yes.
Point of informational clarity. I think what we had limited ourselves to discussing item 3, so that is the Anchorage STR. My motion was that we confirm Brianna's recommendation, Brianna's ruling, which is that Jennifer would be excluded from, or excluded from discussion for the Anchorage STR, but included for Girdwood. And I think your amendment is that Jennifer would be included in both. I think that's where we currently stand.
Let's just stick with Brianna's. I just wanted to make that note, but let's just stick with Brianna's initial one, and we can vote on it. I'm fine with that.
Okay. And from what I understand, if this is a majority or yes, majority vote is the ruling. And if it's made a motion and seconded against my ruling, then it has to be majority for the ruling. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I think the amendment is still on the table, so I'll speak to the amendment briefly. I think the question about whether there is or not a conflict is, to me, fairly clear for the Anchorage case. And although the financial aspect isn't that great, and I believe Jennifer's saying the other parts, the other interests aren't that great, I think it's a difficult precedent to say that this would be not raised to substantial. So in my judgment, it probably does raise to substantial. So I would stick with Brianna's original ruling and vote no to the amendment and yes to the unamended motion.
Thank you, Mike. There's no other comments. Do we first vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So if one of you could just repeat the last part one more time, what a yes and what a no means for the amendment.
So I'll repeat what I believe it is. If we vote yes on the amendment, then what we would be saying is that Jennifer can take part, and then we vote yes on the whole motion. We would be saying that Jennifer can take part in discussions about Girdwood STRs or Anchorage STRs. If we vote no on the amendment, then we are saying that Jennifer will be excused from or recused from discussion on Anchorage STRs, but can take part in the Girdwood STR discussion. So yes means Jennifer take part in items 3 and 4, and no means that Jennifer would take part in item 4, but not item 3.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Kyle, if you're ready.
Okay. Roll call. Mike Edgington.
No.
Brianna Sullivan.
No.
Amanda Sassy.
No.
Guy Wade.
Yes.
And I don't ask Jennifer because it's about her. So what was the count there?
3-1
Motion,
or 1-3, I guess is the answer.
the
1
motion,
in favor and 3 opposed.
motion fails, 1-3.
Okay, thank you. And now we're back to the ruling. Right?
Yeah, so now we're voting to confirm or reject your ruling, your original ruling.
Right. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Thanks for all the patience, everyone. It's our duty to do this.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
Okay, Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy,
Yes.
Guy Wade.
No.
That motion passes 3-1.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Jennifer, for explaining all that you did. And I believe I can go on to agenda revisions and approval. So I'd entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
I make a motion to approve today's agenda with the amendment that was added.
Thank you, Guy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any objections? Okay, we'll go by assent. The agenda is approved. Now I'll say these announcements. The public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussions stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public, and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. GBOS seats A and B terms end in 2024 and will be on the April GVSA ballot. Filing at the municipal clerk's office is between January 12th and January 26th, 2024. For more information, see the hyperlink in the packet. Also, the Foraker Group board training is Tuesday, February 27th at 5 p.m. in the Girdwood Community Room. All are welcome. Okay, number 1 on the agenda, Glacier Creek Suspension Bridge project funding. So,
Sure.
Kyle, Margaret, take it away, please.
Yep. I want to talk with the board about where we're at with this project and the path ahead of us and the involvement that I'm seeking from the Girdwood community in order to get this project constructed. And I'm going to share with you a screen here. What screen am I on right now? I'm going to close this one. Sorry, I'm working off 2 computers. Our network is down, so we're figuring it all out. Okay, so what I'm going to bring up here with you is the professional estimate that we have completed at this point in time with the 35% design. And with that, I want to state that things probably aren't going to change significantly with the design as we go further down the road. We're going to fine tune things, but for the most part, the bulk of what's been designed for the bridge and the interpretive center out there with the Winter Creek Crossing, or the Glacier Creek Crossing on Winter Creek Trail will continue probably be the same. We're just going in to refine that with calculations and things along those lines. But so far, we have used about $300,000 of this $525,000 for the design work and part of the contractual project management. We're right now in plan review. We're in the first one at 35, and then we'll go for another plan review at 95. We should receive comments back from plan reviewers within the municipality by next week. So, and then at that point, we'll tabulate those and put those forward. And so all the funding for this portion came through a CARES Act funding. So we actually had 550,000 for this. So we have a little bit extra room here in that with what we preliminary budgeted of 525. So those funds came in. Looking at going forward towards construction, we set aside 10,000 for right-of-way acquisition, which seems interesting because this is a trail, but the right-of-way would still be working with HLB to get a long-term permit for this area in order to do construction and build. We already have a permit for the hand tram, but now with the bridge coming in, the footprint will be a bit larger on each side. So we would probably want to set money aside in case we have to pay any fees there. Hard to say we'll use those fees, but we should have them set aside so that we know what's coming up. The construction, we have an estimate of about 2.1 million to build the bridge. And this would be also the interpretive center too, which would repurpose the old hand tram and put it into a interpretive center off to the Crow Creek side of the bridge crossing. As well, within this, we put in estimates for what we thought was inspection, project management, material testing, and then a contingency of 15%, which is common within the industry. You usually have a contingency of 10 to 15%. Originally, the estimating company, the professional estimators who did the estimate for us, had a much higher contingency. But after talking with the engineers and the project team, both the U.S. Forest Service and the Muni, they felt comfortable bringing it down to what is the standard average of 10 to 15%. So that represents the 315,000 there you see for contingency. The one thing about this project is just the unknowns. We haven't done many suspension bridges in Alaska. There's really only two on public lands here, one being Byers Lake and the other one being Riley Creek at Denali National Park. And so there's just unknowns on how this type of construction. Plus, it's a remote location, so it'll require helicopter and things like that. So the estimator definitely tried to account for all that within the $2.1 million, but there's just unknowns as you go forward, and especially with the way inflation works there. So at this point in time, we're comfortable with the 315,000 for contingency to deal with those unknowns. We have a miscellaneous that we put in here, which is a 2% overhead. We have right now a $1.2 million grant that was given to us from the state. And I am working internally to avoid the Muni taking their standard 2% overhead from that, which would be $24,000. That's pretty common. But in the past, the service areas have been able to avoid that. And just because we are more of a limited funding revenues. And so usually talking internally with them, and we already pay a IGC to get support from the accounting department that usually takes these funds. And so we work that out internally. So I'm hoping that we can remove that 24,000 and put it towards construction. In total, the project would be 3.1 million estimated. And so that kind of gets me into where we're at. For funding secured so far, we have 1.2 million that we received from the state, 550,000 that we've received in CARES Act funding that we're using currently right now for design. Looking back up into construction, I've gotten a commitment from the U.S. Forest Service that they would take on the expenses for the contractual inspection, project management, and material testing. So that's the equivalent to what we estimate about 170,000 there. We definitely want, and we've been working side by side with the U.S. Forest Service on this to establish them or work with them so that when they do take ownership of the bridge in the long run, they would be comfortable with what they're taking over. So they would be very involved with construction. They've been very involved with design, with their input. So they would take on those responsibilities. We probably still would have a role in it, working with them from the accounting for the project, having an inspection aspect about it from the municipal side, and seeing the project through till the end. What we're looking for now is about $1.2 million to get us to construction. And I'm looking at that in several different ways. But one thing I wanted to talk about tonight or today with the service area and with the board is a commitment from the Board of Supervisors and the service area to putting money towards this project. And then at the same time, my colleagues at the U.S. Forest Service are working internally with their team to see if they can put the same matching commitment towards the project. And at the same time, I am working with private donors and foundations, particularly the Rasmussen, which I had a great discussion with them this week, and looking at a contribution from them to bring the project together. So what I'm looking at is $500,000 from the U.S. Forest Service, $500,000 from the service area, and then what I'm getting from the Rasmussen is somewhere between, I have 225 right now, but somewhere between 225 and 300,000 from the Rasmussen to commit to the project and to bring it forward. So oh, sorry, Amanda, I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to wait till you were done. I thought you were getting close.
Yeah, so that's where we stand at this point. And anyways, I'll open up for discussion and we can get more details as we go.
Thank you, Kyle. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. I probably should recuse myself because I am a Forest Service employee. I didn't realize this agenda item was going to be about Forest Service funding for the bridge. So sorry about that.
Well, would you like to do your disclosure then right now as like a formal statement, Amanda? Just disclose what you're, hold on. Just please explain the nature of your interest of this agenda item so that we understand what you mean.
Okay. I would like to disclose that I am a U.S. Forest Service employee working for the grant management and grants and agreements management. I don't know. I'm a specialist. Anyways, so I actually have been in meetings about this on the Forest Service side. Although I did not realize that we were at this point. It's been like maybe 6 months actually since I've talked to them about it, but I didn't realize we were going to maybe be giving funding to this. So I think that I should not be a part of this discussion.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. If you'd like to recuse yourself, then I guess I don't disagree with that, and we don't need to go through all the questions because obviously this is your job. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Then I will rule that Amanda can recuse herself from this agenda item. Are there any objections to my ruling? Okay. Amanda, then you can just stay on mute for number 1 while we do this. Thank you. And thanks, Kyle. I will hold any questions till anyone else has asked a few. So go ahead, anyone else with questions?
A couple of questions. First one is, I have 3 questions actually. The first one is, I probably misheard you. Did you say 10% contingency or 15%? Because it looks like 15.
15%.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, we've already committed and spent funds on this in some of the pre-design work. Can you remind us how much we've already allocated to the project?
Oh, and the feasibility study that we did?
Feasibility and other.
I think we did that for 30. It's that much. I have to look, but I'm shooting from the hip here, maybe 25,000.
So that it was only the feasibility study that we've actually spent. Every other discussion was about allocation towards, was encumbering, not actually spending. Is that correct? We have had some other discussions about allocating money to the project.
We've only spent money on the feasibility study. I'll say this, the only service area tax funded money went for the feasibility study.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
And I've got another question. I'll let Guy go, and then I'll maybe have one.
Okay, Guy, and then Mike again. Guy, we can't hear you. I think your hand was up.
Yep. Okay. Sorry. I was on mute. Yeah, looking at your contingency there and adding the 10 or 15%. I that's probably pretty close. I don't know if like a risk matrix was developed and that amount, or if that was how the higher contingency was developed, or an actual analysis of risk, the different phases of the construction. I would just say during the construction, it would be, I think it'd be in the best interest of the project to, I don't want to tax the staff with too much, but having putting together maybe a schedule of that risk and where it's going to hit, and as we clear each gate during that, you can remove that risk as you go, just so we don't end up way above this $315,000. I just, a way of tracking that during construction and having some kind of matrix or risk analysis during that, and being able to pull that risk out as soon as we pass those certain points might be advantageous to the project. That's just a comment. Thanks.
No, that's a good point. And the Forest Service has those procedures in place for when they do these type of projects. So they would be handling those decisions and evaluating those risks as they go forward.
Okay, good. Yeah, if they're already doing that, then that's because that's a lot easier said than done, right? So that would be good. That's good to hear. Thank you.
And I think our first level of risk would really be going to bid and seeing what happens. And if the bids come in before, and this has been discussed with the project team, if the bids come in above the funding we have, we just cancel the bid, and then we evaluate what we do after that. But without going out to bid, we're just dealing with a really a sort of shadowy view as to what this costs, because we don't know unless we put it out there. That's the hardest part.
Do you know if that bid's going to be a time and materials not to exceed, or a, what kind of bid exactly? Is it going to be a hard bid where anything going, no, they're going to have to complete it, no matter what it costs, or like time and materials not to exceed unless, what do you know what kind of bid that's going to go out as?
Well, it'll go out as a standard municipal construction bid, which will have a bottom line price to it, but there always will be probably discussions for change orders at the request of the contractor as it goes. But it'll be a line item, and so they'll have to fill out the line items, so what they cost for this portion and that portion, and then come up with a total cost at the bottom, and the way it goes is the lowest bid always wins. So yeah, they'll fill out a line item and come up with the summary.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. No, that I understand that process. And that would make I think your risk analysis even more important, as far as, you're going to have all these different hurdles, not hurdles, but, processes of purchasing and permitting and everything else. So, I taking the lowest bid is fine, but that kind of makes your risk analysis during the process a little more important, in my opinion.
Sure, and that typical way of government, in that aspect. But at least the line items hold the contractor accountable as to what they say. Hey, how much does the steel cost? Well, here's what we can buy the steel for, and things like that. So then they have to have solid justification to request a change order.
Yeah, and it's out of their hands too. At some point, it is what it costs. Yep.
Yep. Exactly. So I would say something that I see as a very positive with this funding format is that we would have mostly all entities involved with funding this project in some way. We would have the federal level, the state level, the local level, and then the private level as well involved in this aspect. And I would say a good portion of the service area funding would probably go towards that. If you're looking at the 500,000, a good portion would go directly towards the interpretive center, which is really going to be maintained by us in the future, as it represents the hand tram and the history there. And then, another portion towards the bridge and basically the removal of the hand tram, which was, something that the service area built. So the contribution is definitely related to activities that we have, that we'll continue to have out there, and we did have out there associated with this crossing.
Thank you, Kyle, for emphasizing that kind of a past, present, and future outlook for the investment. Mike, I think, was next, and then I see Jennifer's hand up. So, Mike, if you're...
Yeah, well, part of my question was a more sophisticated version of that was asked by Guy, so I'll leave that part. But I do have a question about what happens to the contingency if it's not all expended. We have effectively six different funding buckets. Does it get split across all six, or does, I assume, the federal government we won't give money back to, or the state? So would it get split between, so if, for example, we only spend, I'm being optimistic, if we only spend half of the contingency, then we end up with 160,000 allocated. Does that come back to the service area, or does that get split amongst different funding sources? So, for example, the Forest Service and the service area, or back to private? I guess it doesn't go back to private donors. How does the contingency, any unspent contingency, get distributed after the project?
Well, we probably would retain it back to it may be equal split back, but I think we would have to really sort of have an analysis of it to determine. I mean, I would advocate to have the service area money come back with equal portion, maybe going back to the Forest Service in that aspect. But
is this set up as when the contract for, because I see the Forest Service doing project management as well. So is there a contract set up for the project management, and this is part of the terms about how unspent?
Well, one thing we have not finished with and this is probably where Amanda's going to come in, we have not finished the agreement with the U.S. Forest Service, which is probably actually good, because if we get into this sort of discussion, we could, or this agreement with them, then that agreement probably would have to be modified. So I think through that, the agreement that we have for the project, and then the eventual ownership, probably would outline those details. So,
okay.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks. So Kyle, could you, I'm sorry, could you kind of restate your answer to that last question one more time? So it sounds like, am I understanding correctly, like we don't actually have a set answer, it depends on what gets hammered out? Am I understanding that right?
that's correct. So the details of the agreement between the U.S. Forest Service. So one thing we've been holding off on is we wanted to get to the 35% plan and really understand what this bridge looks like and what it costs. And now we've gotten to that. And now we understand what we need to do to get funding. So a requirement of the municipality and of the U.S. Forest Service is to have an agreement which establishes future ownership and management responsibilities. And then if we do move forward in this case, and both entities are able to come up with funding to put towards the project, then that agreement would outline how that funding is used in it. So those details still need to be worked out as we move forward, but we're getting here now to figure out if we have initial commitments from each side to make it happen, to write out that agreement.
Okay, and can I ask a follow-up
Yes.
on that? So the line item, the 170,000 that's right above the yellow highlighted area, is that a set in stone amount, or is that a amount that could change depending on the actual cost of those items? And then is the U.S. Forest Service still responsible for that?
Well, so that is a estimate of what it costs us to contractually do all that work, which means we bring in a group like the Bate Company or some other project management group that would do this work. And in my discussions with the Forest Service, they're like, hey, we have internal staff who does this work. We can do it. And then that way it should cut off the project having to pay a contractor to come in. So it does end up costing the Forest Service more than $170,000, and that would be an internal thing for them. But we wouldn't be working with a contractor to provide that service for us. The Forest Service would handle it through their staffing.
So I'm sorry, if the number does flex, then it's still their responsibility.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And it may be cheaper for them because they can do it internally versus hiring a source outside to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Kyle?
So there's one in the background there, Brad. I have one more question because it came up when we discussed the potential bathroom issue. What do you foresee the maintenance cost for the service area going forwards, and how does that compare to the maintenance costs we had for the hand tram?
There'll be none. Forest Service will be responsible for all maintenance.
For the hand tram, we did have a maintenance cost.
Yes, we took care of all the maintenance for the hand tram.
Okay. Can you recall roughly the order of that? Was that 10,000 a year?
Oh, at least 10,000 a year.
Yeah, not 20 that area.
Because between inspections and rope replacements, a rope just alone was close to $1,800.
Okay.
And then I would put in my time and then parts and things like that. We were up near 10,000 a year.
So doing very crude maths, if we looked a decade forwards after this, when this project is completed, we're talking about 150,000 to 200,000 we would be saving in maintenance costs.
Oh, by keeping the hand tram running?
No, but it compared to if we
Yes.
hand tram.
Yeah, but
that isn't the exact
we still manage that crossing. Yeah, it would easily be 10,000, if not more,
Okay.
just because of, we were looking at substantial improvements for safety out there, and those were starting to get up in upwards of $40,000 to $50,000.
Yes, understood. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, following up on that from Mike, I think, Mike, that's a great point to make, and it might be helpful to have some of those numbers of like what we did end up spending, just in terms of then explaining this level of expenditure to taxpayers. I hadn't even thought of the money that we're now saving, and it sounds like it could have been a pretty substantial amount, especially since it was just increasing over time.
Yes, so I can put that together.
And finally, are you asking for action at this meeting, or is this informational?
I'm asking for action at this meeting tonight.
Okay.
To this case.
So for the purposes of continuing the discussion, then I will make a motion that we allocate or encumber up to $500,000 to the Wood Creek suspension or the Glacier Creek. I don't know that the hand tram replacement suspension bridge.
Yeah, the Winter Creek Trail.
Winter Creek Trail
At Glacier Creek.
At Glacier Creek suspension bridge. And the funding would. Should we say where the funding comes from?
Yeah, from the Girdwood 406 Parks and Rec account.
From the 406 Parks and Rec account.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And further discussion?
I really would prefer to. I'd prefer to vote on this if I knew what was happening with the any redistribution of contingency. My assumption was coming into this that the contingency would come back to the service area rather than be split. But I see, given the numbers, why it's reasonable for it to be split. So I think if we consider the worst case of half the contingency comes back, then optimistically we perhaps only spend 400 or 450,000, but it's probably going to be in that area still.
Yeah, and I can work towards that in our agreement that we split the contingency.
But it would be worse than half.
Well, it just depends on what we see for costs.
I mean, what I meant is if there is an open, the service area would either receive all of that contingency money or half of it.
Or half, yeah. I don't think it would be worse than half. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, I was also curious about that contingency earlier in the meeting. And would it be possible, Kyle, to just bring it back to the board several months into it, so that we could weigh in on where the contingency goes?
Yes, we'll keep the board informed of the costs of the bridge, you know, especially from the get-go. We'll let you know what the bid is, and then if we have the funding available to move forward to construction, then we'll keep you updated on how the expenses are going with the building of the bridge.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or questions?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Do we need to secure the private funding before we go out for bid?
No, the private funding wants to see we've secured it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, no, before we got the bid, yes, we need to secure the private funding. Yes.
Should be able to get that.
Yes. So my steps is to work with the two government entities and then go to the private funder to secure funding there, and then we can hopefully go to bid after that.
Okay, and the timescale for that is perhaps in the next couple of months.
Definitely. I'm meeting with Rasmussen after the new year because they want to hear the outcome of my meetings between the two entities.
And you think you'll have an answer from the Forest Service this month?
I'm hoping, but I don't know.
And we can't ask the person from the Forest Service.
No.
Okay, I'd ask for a roll call vote if there are no other questions.
Okay. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy. Oh, sorry. No, Amanda. Guy Wade,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard.
Yes.
That motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to number 2, review status of Ruin culvert replacement. And I'll read the rest, or you can read the rest, Kyle, as it comes up.
Sure. This is actually a two-part here. What I'll do is I'll talk about the Ruin here in a bit, but the first thing I really want to talk about is the not to exceed amount for Western Construction. Right now within our contract, we have a not to exceed for $700,000 with them. And I'm asking the board tonight or today to increase that to $1 million. And the reason for it is that with Western Construction, we can work with them as our term contractor to get these fish culverts replaced. And we've already started with one with Mount Hood, which they did last year, and it went great and came in below budget by $30,000 below the engineer estimate. And I like to proceed working with them to work on the lower Davos where Glacier Creek comes out, to work on that one this summer. The problem is with the 700,000 not to exceed, then when I do a project like this with them, I can't assign other summer projects. And what we're seeing for engineer estimate on this lower Davos, it's about 575 to get it completed. So right away we would suck up all the money, and then I would not even have enough money to complete winter maintenance with it. And so if we increase the not to exceed to $1 million, it doesn't require us to draw additional tax dollars. We have funding already within our capital account. We have a contribution that's coming in the 24 budget that we could put towards it. And then we can use a portion of what we use for our summer maintenance as well to fund that Davos project. And then we get it completed. I think we've been trying to fund these and get these fish culverts done now for about 7 years. And now we're making progress because we have a contractor who is very capable of handling it. So my request is that we could increase the not to exceed amount to 1 million. And that allows us to work on this project, also tackle other summer maintenance project, which can be just general ditching and maintenance, road improvements. Like last year, we were able to do a dig out on Davos and take out so many trees. I couldn't believe it. Excuse me, on Sproat Road and the mine roads, and take out so many trees and still complete the fish passage that we did on Mount Hood along with several other projects. So yes, so in gist, I'm asking the board to consider exceeding the not to exceed from 700,000 to $1 million for the coming fiscal year.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions from the board?
One question. So normally we would fund the culvert replacement under capital. So what we're effectively doing here is spending capital money under an operating contract. Does that cause any problems from a sort of MOA administrative side?
No, we've been asking this question through MOA, and no, they see it as a term contractor, and they have term contractors throughout the different departments. Actually, PM&E has a term contractor called Spurnack, and they do all kinds of capital repairs and improvements. And they have contracts with those. The same with the Parks Department. They have a term contractor, and both of their contracts are at $1 million, not to exceed. So if we stay within the $1 million limit, then we're working as we do with Western right now within a $700,000 limit.
Okay.
What we would do is that we would turn these projects, these fish culverts, such we did on Mount Hood, we turned it a capital projects. We moved money into the capital account, set it up there, and then draw money from there so that we could start the depreciation process off of it as a capital improvement. So from an accounting aspect, we do account for it as a capital project.
Okay, so although we're funding, although the contract is effectively through the operational side, it doesn't change our budget requirements.
Correct.
We still consider this a capital.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. And just to clarify, this is for 2024.
Correct. We want to do this project in 2024.
And it will require assembly action, I believe, if it's changed the contract.
Yes. So they would send it, and it would probably be a consent agenda item.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Jennifer?
Thank you. I was just wondering, I don't want to interrupt the questions, but if for the sake of procedure, if we need a motion for to approve the change in the NTE.
We do.
Okay, so I will move that we change the NTE for Western Construction to 1 million.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify that we changed it to 1 million for 2024.
For 2024.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'll address it with you if we want to move in 2025, which will be the last year of their contract, and we rebid after 25. So.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. If there's nothing else, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Sure. Brianna Sullivan?
Yes.
Mike Edgington?
Yes.
Amanda Sassy?
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard?
Yes.
Guy Wade?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. That's great. I look forward to the projects and, the multiple projects that we'll be able to partake because of this action. And the next item underneath there, Kyle? Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So I'll talk with you about that. At some point, we will be looking at a 20% matching fund for the service or for the Ruane replacement there. We'll be doing a box culvert. What we have in there has always been temporary until we got through it. We're right now in the process of applying to the EPA, which is housing the 1.6 million for this project. We did at last run, we had an estimate of 2 million for this project. And so we may need to come up with 400,000. Now, there is some wrangling here because we may not need that much from the service area because we are going to try to seek partnership from AWU, whereas this culvert is also protecting a sewer trunk that runs through there, as was well discovered when it collapsed. So that will probably be an internal discussion with the administration to see how that works out and if they can put money towards the matching there. Which was initially the idea when the money was requested from Lisa Murkowski. So I will be back with you on details, but we are just starting the process of applying to the EPA on this and getting this figured out. So hopefully by the first half of the new year, we'll have a better idea about it. Most likely a build in 25 at this point. So that's where we stand right now.
Is the delay until 2025 a concern? I think originally we were expecting within 2 to 3 years of the storm. Yes,
we have. I mean, it's always a concern about storm strength and impact. This September we had a high water event and it covered the pipes and had it up on the side there. But the riprap and the armoring we did significantly has improved the strength of this pipe down there, and the water was getting through and succeeded. The big issue we have now is the extra layer of having to go through the EPA and apply for this grant, and with the transition in some of the administration and changes in jobs, this tracking of this money got lost, and so we just found it in the last month where it was. Between the help of AWU and Lisa Murkowski's office, we found that it was sitting at the EPA. So now we're going through that process, and we know that it's going to take at least 4 to 5 months just to get through the EPA approval process to get a grant. And then when the money gets here, we're probably looking at the money arriving in late 24. So that makes it a challenge. So that I think once we get through that, we can jump. We have most of the design done. It'll just be formalizing a design once the money gets here and get it all together and get it out to bid.
Okay, so the expectation is we would put that out in next winter.
Correct.
And
probably a year from now.
Yeah, about a year from now. By then, we will know what a contribution is.
And through that process, we will probably know that.
So we're really talking about something to be allocated the 2025 budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Kyle, for this update. And I'm sorry it is taking a while with the extra unexpected challenges and people. Are there any other questions for Kyle on this update? Otherwise, will we just ask about it in January or wait another month or two? Kyle?
I'll bring it back to you once we're going to start the process, and we won't probably really get into it until after the holidays. The EPA application, we just started reviewing it, and we're going to have a meeting with AWU because they're doing the same thing on their side for other projects here in Girdwood, funded through this funding. So I'll keep you guys updated, especially as we get to maybe a final application, and let you know where we're standing.
Final application does require a commitment of funding. I'm trying to understand. So our function really is to, once we get the answer from, I understand you explained to us, and I really appreciate that. But we don't have to make a commitment to encumbering that funding until we have an agreement from AWU about what they are contributing.
Yeah, and so that part of that process for the final application is we'll probably be coming to you to say, okay, we've gotten level from AWU. Okay, we can move. So.
It's getting a little choppy. I don't know if it's just me, but I could hear most of that.
Okay. Yeah. What we said was we'll have to work with AWU and the service area to come up with a final commitment to get that 20% established before we submit the application.
Okay. Anything else for Kyle on this? Otherwise, we can move on to the new number 3, which is specifying the GBOS response to Anchorage STRs. And Mike, if you want to definitely start us off, you've done a lot of research on this.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this item limited to what is currently proposed, or at least what is currently from the Assembly. So I believe in one of the previous packets, actually, did we include it? I'm not sure if we did include it in the GBOS packet. I believe it was included in a packet for, I think it actually was in our last meeting, wasn't it?
The original
AO 2023 one.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it is in the GBOS packet. It's definitely in the housing and economic.
Yes. I'm going to make sure that everyone receives a copy of that. So the Assembly have an ordinance which basically adds a licensing requirement for short-term rentals across the whole of the municipality. There are some requirements in the licensing, most of which relate to, or some of which relate to advertising and occupancy, and others relate to what I would call kind of neighborhood effects of short-term rentals. So it does not do anything around limiting the number of short-term rentals. It doesn't do anything around restricting where they are. What it does do is have one small hook in it, which refers to land use code and says that short-term rentals do have to accord with any land use restrictions, of which currently there are none in Title 21. It's not it's not mentioned at all anywhere as a use. There is an argument that short-term rental is not actually a legal residential use. There is an argument that short-term rental is falls under one of the other visitor accommodation standards in land use. But nothing is clearly delineated in our current situation. However, that proposal as stands, we are expecting to be replaced by an S version, possibly at the next meeting. There will be the item has been delayed until I believe the second assembly meeting in January, which is January the 23rd.
23rd. The 9th and the 23rd.
Yeah, I believe it was pushed to the 23rd. It could have been the 9th. I don't recall. I believe 23rd, though, but we'll confirm that. And I believe either between now and then or then, an S version will be introduced. I also expect there to be a work session in January on the topic of short-term rentals in Anchorage. So we decided at our last meeting, and sorry, one last thing on that. What Randy has told me since I asked is that the S version probably have fewer requirements in. So it will be very similar to the current one, but will remove some requirements. I believe it was removing requirements around inspection. It was removing requirements around the occupancy limits. I don't know what else will be changed by then. We'll have to wait and see. But we can think of it as being less stringent than the current version. At our previous meeting, we had a vote and basically held the opinion that this does not go far enough to address the many of the issues of short-term rentals in Girdwood. We did not come to a conclusion about whether we would support this or oppose this, or how we would go about recommending changes or getting amendments. So that's where we currently stand on the proposal that's in front of the Assembly.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions? Amanda or Guy? Mike, do you expect to hear anything back from Randy before the January 9th meeting?
Well, I'll keep asking. I expect that what will typically happen is if there's an S version that's going to be introduced, it will either be introduced at a meeting or it will be available when the work session happens. It will be formally introduced at the following meeting. So typically for something like this, let's assume it is the 23rd. There will be a work session before, maybe 2 weeks before. And in that work session, the S version will be sort of shared with the work session, and that will be formally introduced. There might be some other changes discussed in the work session, and then a version of that S version will be introduced at the following meeting. So at the moment, we only have guesses about what contains in the S version, but it sounds like it's going to be very similar to the current proposal, but with some requirements removed.
Okay.
So I guess the question for us as a body is, we've already determined this doesn't go far enough to address the issues we have in Girdwood, but is this something we should work from, or is this something we should try and change, or is this something we should try and exclude ourselves from? I don't know if there's a mechanism possible, because we are, this is under licensing, which applies municipal wide. It's not under one of the parts of code which has different sections for Girdwood.
Okay. Guy has a question, and we'll go back to that open question, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Brianna. So our action could be adding to this actual amendment, this S version coming out, or being part of those work sessions. That's our action, and trying to put language into this ordinance, or is it just we're looking to write a resolution? What exactly?
I think that's the question. I believe that's the question for the body guy. So we have made a decision. This doesn't really address many of the core problems in Girdwood. So we've said this isn't enough. That's what we've said as a body. And I think we obviously we could formalize that and go no further. I think at the minimum, what my feeling is, at the minimum, what we should do is have a resolution which says what we need in terms of Girdwood, or at least what goals need to be met for Girdwood. But we can discuss that under item 4. I think this part of the discussion is really to decide what we should do. Should we just write a resolution opposing it? Should we write a resolution suggesting changes? In which case we may want to cover those changes under the next item 4, or do we just take part in the process and not do anything formally?
Can we? I mean, are we invited to those work sessions and add language, modify?
There isn't actually a work session scheduled, but I'm sure we can get invited to it. Yes, I'm sure Zach and Randy will do that.
Okay, thanks, Guy, and thanks, Mike. It looks like Matt has a question.
Maybe not so much a question, but a comment or just a consideration. Would simply be maybe for this, you don't kind of say you're for or against it, but instead you ask to be carved out of it. And then under the next agenda item, so you have a kind of a resolution basically asking for a carve out. And then in the next agenda item, there's a second resolution item, which basically says that Girdwood wants to effectively put in, basically control its own destiny and write its own rules under this. And I don't know whether that gets us out of this issue, if there's a licensing issue related to the municipality, but maybe it kind of through those two resolutions, it kind of makes clear to the assembly members, what the community would like to do if the community would want to go down that path. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Brett, go ahead.
Right, thank you. And then I guess in the vein of a comment, I'll follow Matt, that it just seems to me that the way that the ordinance is written, the end result is to accommodate some level of workforce housing accommodation. So I know that it's a registration plan under municipal rules, and that part I get. But if there were any extra revenues to come from that, it says in the ordinance that would address workforce housing issues in Anchorage. I think that because Prop 7 was passed, that we are considering how to address these workforce housing issues, that STRs are part and parcel to that discussion. And it seems that this assembly ordinance, although it could provide our service area a registration service, if you will, which is necessary, some level of regulation, I believe that the AO goes a bit too far in that it precludes what the voters in Girdwood have decided, that addressing the workforce housing issue is a priority. So the GHEC has been in consideration of short-term rentals and the impact on availability of long-term rental properties. And this ordinance appears to have many negative effects for the effort of GHEC and trying to solve the workforce housing issue. So I think Girdwood came to the plate early in this, and maybe that would give a different perspective in how GBOS responds to municipal registration regulation and support a considerable carve out or consideration for Girdwood to handle our unique resort town short-term rental workforce housing issue, which is different than the goals that the Anchorage Assembly has for this ordinance. So I would advise to take that into consideration, that we may be ahead of the game here, and that Anchorage should consider accommodating what our voters have already decided here in Girdwood. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Brett. Are there any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a question for Brett, if that's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think my understanding from a comment you made in a previous meeting is you have had, or Randy has reached out and had discussions with you about this ordinance. And I know I asked and didn't get anything from him. So I just wondered if you had any more insights about what their plan was for the S version.
Oh, I can't say I'm privy to any future thoughts of that, other than I really have a hard time understanding how Girdwood solves the issues that we have, and sort of wrestle the STR-LTR ratio problem with this ordinance. And I think that with that, in my simple discussion, we both agreed that Girdwood is unique and has a different outcome in mind for this regulation. So I'm not sure if Title 10 regulation that way can specifically designate Girdwood as being so different, but I would contend that our service area has some level of authorization to mitigating this problem, and that within that framework, Girdwood should be considered as a different market and as a different registration market for short-term rentals. So,
Thank you, Brett. Did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I would, I don't need to entertain a motion on this. I would just suggest that if the body's okay with that, we could take no action on the Anchorage AO as it is, but perhaps request from GBOS that Girdwood has not necessarily, and well, that we have a separate ask for Girdwood specifics.
So I was originally we scheduled this item because the Assembly could take action as soon as, well, actually they could have taken action as soon as earlier this week, but realistically there was a possibility they may have just pushed this off until the end of this month. Now we know it's at least into next month. I think we have a little bit more time to respond, so I agree that we don't need to take any action now. We can perhaps consider taking action at our next regular meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Can I attempt to summarize where I think we are with this as well?
Go ahead.
The question, I don't think there is a clear resolution. We can come up with a clear answer as to whether we are better off being excluded from this regulation, and I don't know if there's a mechanic for doing so. But if we can be excluded, I don't know if we are better off excluding ourselves from this, having no regulation, and then trying to put in our own thing in the future, which will be a Girdwood only resolution where we are expecting the Assembly to enact something for Girdwood only, or whether we are better off politically trying to incorporate our requirements to this. I think that is a sort of a practical and political question that we need to consider before we take any formal action, because the Assembly clearly is going to go ahead with this, probably go ahead with this particular process, and trying to get their attention to solve a problem which is Girdwood only might be difficult in the future. So I would consider that as well.
Thank you, Mike. And I also thought that not the urgency, but the idea behind having this right at this time of the year and where this AO is currently is so that we can say something before it is acted upon. And kind of like Brett said, not early in the game, but we're following this and we'd like to be included in our unique way before it is passed. So I think that an action we take is on agenda item number 4, if it is, since we're taking this time to discuss it and hopefully come up with something more specific. Matt, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would note it too that, you know, I've talked to Randy as well, or some of us talked to Randy, and, you know, I'd be surprised if there's going to be any substantial changes to the amended one that's going to impact Girdwood. I don't think they have the time, frankly, to deal with us as such a small percentage of the population with this, you know, with this. I understand I understand the concern too about not kind of having any regulation at any point in time. And I don't know whether it's politically, you know, if in the last comment I said that we could have a carve out. Well, I don't know if it's possible to exist under the current rules or the rules that they propose until we determine what our own destiny is. But I think that's a very, if we get caught under the municipality's rules, I think it's going to be very hard to get unstuck from them. And then we lose control of our ability to solve our problem. So I would be just weary about trying to stay under the municipality's, you know, purveyance on this issue. And again, kind of strongly encourage the community to kind of resolve it for ourselves. I'd rather fight within the community to try and figure out the solution than fight with the municipality when most of them don't have the vested interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Further comments on this?
I'd like to pose one more question perhaps for the body. So if the proposal which is front of the Assembly now identified that funding at least any excess costs over the costs of administration for the registration fee. So i.e. there is the assumption that some of the license fees may be excess to the needs of the administrative system. So that would be effectively money which goes into some other fund. If we could get at least a commitment and something in the ordinance which clarifies that additional funding goes into a Girdwood, the Girdwood service area when it's coming from Girdwood STRs, would that be enough to push us to? Would that be effectively enough of a movement to push us towards the self-control aspect, that we can still act on other things as well? Is really the concern about this ordinance as stands, that the money goes into the general fund, not into, although it's allocated towards housing, it goes into the fund for housing across the muni, not necessarily to Girdwood.
Right, Mike, this is Brianna, and I absolutely agree that if we could just change one thing or amend one, it would be that in that statement that says the excess fees from this ordinance go to development of workforce housing in the municipality, that there's this side part B or something that we can say that in our service area, these STRs go to our development of workforce housing. That would be like the absolute most, the great thing that we could add to this instead of a few edits somewhere else. But I didn't know if that would be in item number 4 or item number 3. Those are my thoughts. Any other board comments before I go to Brett?
Okay, is it my turn?
Go ahead, Brett. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, thank you. Right, so great example of how those types of STR things should be used to solve our problems, and that's within our service area. Absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. But the next example of where we need to make changes, and this keeps going on and on and on. There are a lot of little changes and tweaks to be considered, but immediately I came across information that the proposed rate to be charged is half as much as some members want to charge. So already they're talking about increasing the fees, and we haven't even talked about what services or goals are being met by those types of regulatory additions. And so the summary of that is that we can pick those things like you just highlighted, Brianna, and totally agree with that. But there's at least a half a dozen or a dozen right behind it that are detrimental. If those fees go up by that amount, it could cause the type of black market operation in Girdwood for STRs that we would lose all input as to who's operating that way, and would preclude us from making good policy to rein in or to steer that type of market activity. So although it's well intentioned to make little modifications to this proposed ordinance, I think there's many examples that might suggest that we want to do a real carve out for Girdwood so that we can have these discussions and we can talk about the effects of making those types of rate changes or licensure changes, and how it would affect us locally and not have to pass it through assembly ordinance every time we recognize that we're different enough to need a different rule. So it just sort of exemplifies that we need to manage this specific rule for the short-term rental activity in Girdwood because we have a service area to handle workforce housing, and this is the mechanism, this is the activity that's causing the impact. So I think it's even more critical that we're carved out. So great example, and appreciate the support for at least trying to mitigate our workforce housing issues, you know.
Okay, thanks everyone. I just saw a meeting warning on my screen. Kyle, what time is this scheduled until?
I think we have until 2, so.
Okay. All right. Well,
We have a few more minutes then. I'm just going to respond. I appreciate Brett's comments, and I wish we were in that environment where we could, we had the power in the service area to administer these things purely by ourselves and change the rules. We do not. Any change in fees or anything else, even if we had our own process, would have to go through the assembly. So we're in a situation where any change that requires a code change has to go through the assembly. Even when we're moving money from one of our accounts to a different account, it has to go through the assembly. So unfortunately, we are not in a position where we have any degree of independence at this sort of level.
right. I thank you, Mike, for that clarification and insight. Is it prudent to make an action on the way we have it worded on number 3 today, or take action on number 4?
My sense is we can take any action at our next regular meeting if we decide to do so. Okay. But I think we might be worth having a formal statement, so having a resolution ready for our next meeting.
Absolutely agree with that.
I will take on the task of drafting something.
Excellent. Any other comments on number 3? And I appreciate the discussion. That'll set us up for number 4. If everyone's ready, we'll move on to agenda item now number 4, which is the STR response for Girdwood specific. So thanks for having that up on the screen, Kyle. I also have different parts of it. So again, Mike, would you like to start off on the Girdwood, more specific for number 4? Actually, Jennifer, you're ready. So Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you, Brianna. I think that there was actually a little bit of overlap, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed like the previous discussion was bleeding over, because the question of a carve out is actually Girdwood specific. And I appreciate the insight that we're not necessarily set up or that things would need assembly approval, but I'm not sure that that's a reason to walk away from the option altogether. So the discussions that I've had with Randy, he's been pretty clear that he just can't make this fit Girdwood, and that he has said zoning overlay, that may not be what we want, but in the event of us, I think that it might be something worth asking for, first of all, even if we're not going to get it. And second of all, I think it would raise awareness for the whole assembly that this actually doesn't necessarily help us that much, or certainly doesn't address the most immediate of our needs. And anyway, so that's where
Thanks.
I just wanted to get that in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for those points, Jennifer. Okay, next in line, go ahead. Not everyone has a hand.
I'll put my hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it in my previous discussion with Randy, it was very clear. I think I explained what at least my sense was that we needed as a community at the very beginning of this process, and he basically said he wasn't interested in going much further than what we eventually saw of a registration. In fact, I think originally he was saying there should be his presentation to the rest of the assembly in a work session was that there should be no real regulation at all. And I see now there's a registration only regulation. So I don't think that Randy is interested in doing anything further, whether it benefits Girdwood or not. I do know that in general, the assembly want to see if it's a Girdwood specific problem or a Girdwood specific proposal, they want to see the sponsorship by at least one representative here. I've generally mentioned this in general to Zach. I'm not entirely clear that he's in a position to sponsor something. I will clarify that. I think he may have involvement he may have some short-term rental hosting that he does, or at least his family does. So we will follow that up. But I mean, it's possible we can get amendments sponsored by other representative for this district. Anyway, so jumping forward to item 4, what I've heard in sort of as general goals from several years of discussion here, I've identified 4 goals, I think, in regulation of short-term rentals. So number 1 is to have some method of dealing with the immediate impacts on local neighborhoods. So we've already touched on this a little bit, the problems around Echo Ridge and adding parking requirements, or adding no parking along one side of the street. So this is, in many ways, this is the item which the assembly proposal does address. It deals with issues around large numbers of people, noise complaints, parking requirements, and things of this ilk. So goal number 1 is basically deal with neighborhood concerns and provide a mechanism for complaint and resolution. The second thing I've heard and this came up particularly in the last housing committee meeting, housing and economic development committee meeting, was ideally this would provide some way to incentivize more long-term rental usage, or even a way of moving from short-term rental to long-term rental. And I see that as potentially either a carrot or a stick solutions. The third item was that whatever we do with STRs, there needs to have a mechanism to basically provide funds for mitigation of the impact on workforce housing, which is what Brett was talking about earlier. And I think it would, at least the suggestions we've had so far, is this would go beyond any licensing fee and include room tax receipts itself. And the fourth thing I've heard is from a lot of people is that what we don't want to do is create big hurdles for residents who are using part of their primary housing for short-term rental. So there is a distinction between, at least many people in the community see a distinction between people who are living in a home and using either that home part of the year or part of that home for short-term rental, as opposed to purely commercial short-term rental activity, which is where it's never really a residential home. A property is either a second home or an investment property, or run 24/7, 365 days of the year as short-term rentals. Now, how we do that, I'm not going to touch on right now, but there have been various suggestions. But those four general principles, the one is there needs to be a mechanism of dealing with neighborhood concerns. There should be part of a set of tools which encourage more long-term rental. Any money coming from regulation or taxing of short-term rentals should go into a Girdwood specific fund for mitigation of their impact on housing. And we don't want to put big barriers in the way for residents, full-time residents who use part of their property for short-term rentals. So they're the four principles I think we could probably discuss and maybe even write down in a future document.
Thank you, Mike, for laying those clearly. And I had thoughts in the middle, but also with the AO that I found online, right beneath it was the recent, well, in October, the publication from HUD. And that's really great news to incentivize people to use and have ADUs. So similar to switching perhaps from short-term, people would do long-term or have an ADU instead to help their mortgage. But I agree with these four goals with the discussion, and especially the one I mentioned in the number 3, which is specifying where the excess fees can go for our service area to help our housing emergency. And then the parking is slightly different here because, like, I think somewhere months ago in code, we could somehow state something Girdwood specific. I don't think I have anything else right now. And we could have a resolution with those 4 with any more details for our next regular meeting. And then perhaps the assembly can look at what they are able to work with and accommodate us somehow. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Mike was saying. Mike, I wasn't able to write fast enough, so I'm not sure I'll have all those down, but Margaret, I'll just look at the minutes afterwards. But it sounded well stated. And I just wanted to point out that I believe one of your principles was about not penalizing people who are not running STRs as year-round businesses. And that's been one of my issues with this. I think it's another thing that we could potentially specifically address is this flat fee registration, especially since we have heard from Randy that it's strong pressure to increase it, to actually double the amount. And at that point, it definitely penalizes people within Girdwood who are using STRs only to help subsidize. I know people who are using them only to help subsidize their vacations, so that if they're gone for a couple weeks, if they rent it out, it can pay for their vacation. So, but an $800 fee, even $400 really kicks into it. So anyway, I just wanted to say that there are kind of specific action items connected to potential action items connected to the principles you mentioned.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I would suggest, so that we're prepared for the next regular meeting, that any suggestions could go to Margaret so that when we draft the resolution, it could be shared without any issues. Anything else? I know Amanda had to leave. So if Guy or Mike has anything else. Number 4.
What I'm going to suggest is in the previous item I suggested I would draft a resolution specifically for the current regulation from the Assembly, and I think what we'll do is possibly a second, although it'll be closely related, a second one which at least drafted to restate the goals I stated earlier with the adjustments that we've been discussing.
Thanks, Mike. I would be happy to help you with that. And then we could have both options at our next meeting. I think, Guy, you were about to say something.
No, I'm good.
Anybody?
Thanks.
I know we're getting close to the end of anyone's lunch available time in the middle of the day, so feel free to chime in. Okay. Thanks for all of your work on this, Mike, and research, and everyone's suggestions in attending. Both Brett and Matt, appreciate your comments and your research. Okay, don't hear anything else. I'm gonna move over to the agenda item, if there's nothing else, and go to public comment. Persons offering public comment must state their full name and address. It's limited to 3 minutes per person, and it must be on subjects not listed on the agenda. Does anyone have anything extra to say today for public comment? Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn and thank everyone for being here.
To adjourn.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
afternoon.
Yeah.